All right guys, today I'm going to cover the breeding process of a veiled chameleon. And this video might be a little longer than typical, but that's because I'm going to cover everything that you need to know if you want to breed veiled chameleons. I'm going to take you through the beginning of the process when the male tries to lock up with the female and actually breed with her, and then what you have to do to set up a box for the female to lay in, and then how to collect the eggs after she lays them, and then how to get them into the incubator, what temperatures to set your incubator at, how long it's going to take for them to hatch, and then of course how to handle the babies after they do hatch and how to get them into their new enclosure, and even how to feed them their first meal. So there's a lot that's going to be covered in this video. So if you're into veiled chameleons and you're thinking about breeding them, this is the video for you. And the first thing that happens in the breeding process is the male starts chasing down the female. He'll start displaying really bright, pretty colors trying to impress her while he's trying to chase her down and mate with her. And she's gonna turn black with super bright colored oranges and blue spots on her. It's kind of like a signal by color to tell the male, stay away, I'm not interested. They display the same colors once they become gravid as well. And that's the female's way of trying not to breed with the male, but the male just keeps coming at her and chasing her down. He'll chase her up and down this entire enclosure here, and then he'll finally catch up to her, and you'll see her mouth kind of opens, and she's screaming, and she's making these noises that we can't hear. It's at a different frequency than we can hear, but she's just basically saying, leave me alone. And like I said, eventually he catches up to her, he grabs a hold of her, and he begins to mate with her. And after the male locks up 2 or 3 times, the female becomes gravid. And after she becomes gravid, she'll start wandering around this big pool enclosure here looking for a place to lay her eggs. And if you keep your chameleon in one of these 2x4 enclosures, which is considered an extra large enclosure, I consider it very small for a chameleon, but that's considered an extra large screen enclosure. If your chameleon's in there, it's going to start digging up whatever plants you have in there, so you need a big lay box for that chameleon. And what I use for a lay box is a big pot, because the chameleon's going to dig down about 1 foot or more. They dig to the very bottom of the biggest pots that we have in here that are almost 2 feet deep. So these chameleons love going deep. That's not the same for all chameleons, but veiled chameleons do dig very deep when they're laying their eggs. So this right here is the size lay box that I use. As you can see, it's not super deep. It's maybe 12, 13 inches deep or so, maybe 14 inches. I'm not sure exactly how deep it is. It's a very big pot. So I fill this with topsoil, and because I don't want any kind of fertilizer. You don't want anything like that touching the chameleon eggs. I fill it with topsoil, and then I plant some plants like coleus or other plants with small roots around the top. I've been putting some Mexican petunias and different things in there because chameleons like laying their eggs near the roots of plants and trees and things where they feel protected. They don't want to put them next to a plant that's going to have roots that'll take over the eggs and choke them out, but they do want some kind of root structure there, so they dig underneath the roots and tend to lay their eggs under the roots of the plant that you put in the box. And again, this is a perfect size here. This is what I use all the time. And when the chameleon does become pregnant and she does start looking to lay eggs, they'll start digging my plants up in here. And what I do is I move them to one of the cages with this lay box in there and several other trees so the chameleon's not stressed. And I leave her in there for about a month or so until she lays her eggs. We have several female chameleons in here, but we only keep one adult male chameleon at a time because the males will fight. We've had 2 in here several times before. It just doesn't work out. They go at it. They all want the females, but we can't have 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 females. As many females as we want is fine, but only one male, no matter how big the enclosure. And after the female digs all the way to the bottom of this pot and lays her eggs, because she's gonna lay them pretty much right on the bottom, that's where I find them every time, you can go ahead and move her out of the cage, take the pot out of the cage, and slowly start moving the dirt out of the way, and you'll see the eggs down there. They lay anywhere from the clutches that I've had, anywhere from about 20, 25 up to about 80 or so. The biggest clutch that I've had so far is 77. And it really just depends on how old your chameleon is. Is it a year old or is it 4 years old? You know, they're gonna lay more eggs the older and more mature that they are. And also they're more used to breeding down the road as well. And for some reason, my clutches have been averaging, even on the, the younger ones, probably about 40, 50 eggs. So they do lay a bunch of eggs. And before you pull the chameleon's eggs out of the container that she just laid them in, you're going to want to set up a box for your incubator. And what you want to use in that is vermiculite. You're going to take vermiculite and you're going to mix it with warm water, and you're going to get it at a consistency where it's not like soaked and dripping where you can pour water out of it, but very moist all the way through it. And then you're going to take the eggs and you're going to lay them exactly the way that you picked them up from the pot, because you don't really want to turn them over and roll them around. Just lay them in there in individual rows. And then you're going to take some press and seal and you're going to press it over the top of the plastic container. I usually poke a hole in the top of the container with a pencil or something to let some of the humidity out. But what that does is, with all that water that's in the vermiculite, it keeps the eggs very humid and moist, like their natural environment, and that's what needs to happen for the eggs to hatch. They need to keep that elasticity. It's not like a chicken egg that's hard. They're very soft, and they actually grow as they're in the incubator. So you will see the size of the eggs change some, which is pretty neat. And anyways, you just cover them up with the press and seal in the little box that you created for the eggs to go in. And when you put them in your incubator, you want it at about 80 degrees. I incubate my ball python eggs at 90, 91 degrees. I incubate the chameleon eggs at 80 degrees. They can go down as low as, 77 degrees, maybe 76 or so, but you really want to keep it at about 80. And it can go as high as about 85, but you're starting to get into a danger zone in either direction. So set your incubator 79, 80 degrees, and that should be perfect. I know people that hatch them in their house where they keep their house real warm, and even in garages and things like that, and that can work out. But an incubator is kind of a foolproof way to make sure that your eggs hatch and they're getting the proper heat and temperature the entire time that they're in there. And the other thing with veiled chameleons is it takes a long time for their eggs to hatch. A veiled chameleon's eggs will take 6 to 7 months to hatch. So that's a long time to keep them in the incubator. So after about 6 or 7 months, you're gonna see little green heads start to pop out of the eggs. And it usually takes the chameleons anywhere from a day or two to pop out of the eggs up to a couple weeks. So from the time your first little baby chameleon pops out of that clutch of, 40, 50 eggs that you get, until the last one pops out will probably be about a 1 to 2 week spread. That's been average for me. I've been breeding them now for over 4 years. I've actually owned reptiles my entire life. I've been breeding ball pythons for a long time. I have a Class 3 reptile license, so I'm allowed to sell the animals that I breed. And so we've really got into chameleons, and what we found works is pretty much everything I'm telling you here in this video. And we're not just breeding one chameleon or a pair of chameleons every year. We're breeding between a half a dozen and a dozen females every season. Sometimes to the same male, sometimes to multiple males. So we've learned a lot of things along the way, and every clutch that we have has been successful, thank goodness, because we found what works and we keep repeating the same process. And so there is different conditions for people that are in the house and their chameleons are in cages and there's things going on like that. So the chameleons will behave differently when you put them together. But now that the eggs have made it 7 months, and you have those little baby heads starting to pop out, you have to have something ready for them to go in. And so what I do is I set up the 24 by 24 by 48 screen enclosures. You can get them online on Google, on wherever, Amazon, wherever you shop. And that's considered an extra large enclosure. I consider it extra small. A veiled chameleon needs the biggest enclosure you can possibly give it. If you can build it something 3 times as big, great. So it's a completely different environment and ecosystem than if I was to put it in this little 2-foot area by 4 foot tall. It can barely climb up and down. It can barely stretch out from side to side. So the bigger your environment for your chameleon, the better. And it's more fair to the animal. If you're gonna have an animal, take the best care you can of it, as good a care as you can. The best you can do for that animal would be a big enclosure. And so now that these little guys are hatching, I use the 24 by 24 by 48 screen enclosure. I put some different plants in there. There's actually a video on the YouTube page here on how to set up an enclosure for baby chameleons. I would recommend watching that one if you want to really get in depth on how to do it. But you put the right plants in there, things that aren't toxic, things that won't hurt them, some vines that they can grab onto, plenty of room for them to roam around, and then you can get your chameleons out of your egg box that they just hatched in and start moving them into their enclosure. The first thing I do when I pull them out of the egg box is sometimes I just rinse them off with a little bit of water just to get the vermiculite off of them, and then I let them walk off of my finger into their new home. And there's never a threat. They don't try running from you. I'm literally the first thing those chameleons see when they hatch. So they have no understanding of fear like the wild chameleons we can catch here in Florida that just kind of take off and don't want to be held. You can train these chameleons to want to be held and to come to you. And the one thing that's going to take that is food. And I'll cover that in another video as well, because that's the key to their heart. All right, so after you have your chameleons and you have them in their new enclosure, the first meal you're going to want to feed them is a 1/8 inch cricket. Not a pinhead cricket. The reason I'm saying 1/8 instead of pinhead is because even the 1/8 inch crickets will crawl through the holes in that screen enclosure. So pinheads, they're in and out before the chameleons can even find them. So I take the 1/8 inch crickets, I'll feed them those for about 2 weeks, maybe. And then I go straight up to the 1/4 inch. Okay, and that's what I feed them for about the first 2 months. And then they're on 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch until they're on adult crickets. And, but anyways, start them on that first meal with about a 1/8 inch cricket. And this is what a chameleon looks like just a few weeks after he hatches. This one here is about 3 weeks old. He's been eating 1/4 inch crickets now for about 2 weeks. He went off the 1/8 inch crickets after the first week. They were a good size clutch of little baby chameleons there. But anyways, after they pop out of their eggs and you put them in their enclosure, you start them on that 1/8 inch cricket. They'll do really good on it. Move them up to 1/4 inch crickets, and you can see they're a very chill animal. They don't look like they're stressed. They don't look like anything's going on. But the fact of the matter is you really don't want to hold these guys a whole lot. Spend maybe 2 or 3 minutes a day holding them tops, because they do get stressed out even if they don't show it. He's probably looking for a way out of here right now. So I let him get used to me, hold them a little bit. Sometimes I'll hold one of the little crickets by the legs to get them to eat from me, just to get a little more familiar and less stressed. But the less you hold these guys, the better. They're one of those pets that are better just to look at. And I hope this helped you with the breeding process of chameleons from pretty much beginning until end, until they're on their own like this. And within less than a year, usually about 8 months, these little guys here are big enough to breed, believe it or not. They're very fast growers. Depending on the sex, the size, the type, they typically live between 5 to 7 years, usually max, on a veiled chameleon. And really neat animals, cool pets.